Welcome back to Maximum News. I'm your host, as always, your friendly neighborhood Simpsons-kin, Maximilian Danger Derrat, Max for short. And joining me, as always, is Syb from the Triple S League. And I just want to say before we get into the news, screw Cineplex. All right, that's not game-related, but I tried to go see Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse today. And for the fourth time in a row, well, not in a row, the fourth time ever, I was unable to see it because the IMAX screen was broken. You could see the movie playing, but there was no sound. And no joke, up here in Canada, there's this company called Cineplex that virtually has a monopoly on the theater chains. Like, unless you live in like a more rural area where there are like smaller theaters, you're going to go to a Cineplex theater. And because they have a monopoly, they have no incentive to stop crap like this from happening. So, yep, happened to me 4 times, and it happened to me again today. So, screw Cineplex. And that was just me complaining about that. But you're not here to hear me complain about that. Well, I mean, you already did. But
you're here to hear us complain about other things that have to do with the gaming
industry. Yes, and we actually, unfortunately, got a lot to do with that today. We got a couple of positive news stories, but mostly it's complaining, which is too bad because the last little while we've had a lot of good stories. But yeah, we're back to the regular rhythm. Syb, Redfall was a thing. It was a lot of bad things, and now we know why it was a lot of bad things. Go.
Yeah. So my favorite internet journalist, who has me blocked, and to whom we have gotten in arguments in the past with direct arguments,
Jason
has done an investigation, and between that and a bunch of other people doing some investigations, talking to some people, going through LinkedIn, going through hiring profiles, other things like that, we now have a really good idea of what happened here with Redfall. So I'm going to give you the skinny on it. Bellular did a huge 30-minute deep dive into it. I've checked a lot of what he said, checked some of the sources that have been kind of going around. Again, things that are easy, like LinkedIn is like, I don't know how LinkedIn isn't banned for companies now. I guess it's because the usefulness of it outweighs the constant leakage of problems and like clear evidence stuff. So I guess this is one of those things that we're just going to have to deal with it. We're not going to have to deal with it. They're going to have to deal with it, and we're going to gather information off of it. So what we can tell in the autopsy of the game is that basically nobody at the studio wanted to make this game except for a handful of like a few of the team leaders and a few of the leadership.
Yeah.
Arkane was not made to make games like this, not even in the general sense of this. They make single player, story driven, puzzle based combat games. Other than the word combat and single player, there's no correlation here with this product. There's no similarity of purpose. There's no similarity of goals. There's absolutely no design or feature concept that translates well between the teams. And not only did they keep this game fairly quiet in the development process, they kept it so quiet that a lot of people that were brought in to be hired near the end of the development of their last game were not told that they were going to be working on a live service, like multiplayer type, sort of like single player heavy, but multiplayer aspirational looter shooter.
Yeah.
And those people did not want to be making that game.
Yeah, they specifically avoided all the other studios because they were doing that. Yeah, we came here to make, games like Prey and Dishonored, immersive sims. Well, too bad. You're making Dishonored. A live service. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a lot of them quit during the process. And instead of being able to like hire new people in for that, they just, in a lot of cases, they just didn't hire that back entirely. And as of now, over 70% of the studio has actually quit.
Yep. 70%.
So, yeah. So I hate to say it, but the studio is essentially dead. And that's terrible because the Dishonored series is one of Ash's favorite titles, IPs. And it looks like unless they manage to redo a lot of rebuilding, this is a dead studio now. And really what stemmed and what pushed that dead studio status is that that really they just refuse to come out and say it. They refuse to come out and tell Microsoft that, hey, when you bought us, we were starting to work on this game. We should have just canceled it. That was something that has been, for the most part, clearly iterated on, is that Microsoft didn't come in and say, hey, do you guys really want to make this game, or would you rather make another Dishonored game? There was none of that discussion. This was a carryover, one of the last carryovers from the ZeniMax studio orders.
Yeah.
So the ZeniMax ordering the studios, not ZeniMax Studio, but the ZeniMax parent company ordering their studios to put an emphasis on live service games, and with like loot boxes and that kind of stuff. Now, the loot boxes didn't really make the transition over, but the whole live shooter did. And this is the outcome of it, is that it was a complete and total failure, because on paper it's like loot box shooter, vampires and lobby based stuff. It's like, that is on paper that's a good idea. Like, vampires are always popular, except when they're not, which is usually like a space between times when they are. I know that's a very obvious thing, but at any rate,
right.
The studio basically should have canceled this. Microsoft should have canceled this, but nobody called out the obvious. Nobody said the obvious. And this bad idea, this bad conception, because looter shooters are on the way out right now. Like, their popularity is dwindling so fast. They just don't have the same level of oomph that they had, and the oomph that is there is with specifically other studios that have more successful products right now.
Yeah.
And you don't really have that. You really, really do not have that in this product here.
Yeah, you have sort of the titans of that genre, and unless you have something really, really unique and that really changes the game, you're not going to supplant the likes of Destiny, Borderlands. Would Warframe be considered a part of that? Kinda.
So yeah, there are some games that are like, obviously slightly more prevalent. And let me just pull up this list here. So you got Valorant, Apex, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike Global is still kind of there. But games like other games that are kind of in the genre or slightly outside of it, Warframe being one of them, it's not really like those aren't doing. They're not in a growth phase. They're in a slowly dying kind of like phase.
Yeah.
And I think Warframe and the studio is pretty decent. I think they've had some slip ups a little bit more recently, and but they've also had some bangers. They've really been doing some amazing work in building the scope of it. It's just that the game itself, I think, has been getting a little bit old, and I think that I think and I hope that at some point they're just going to launch a new game or a new, like, slightly different take on the game, because it's like it's still a lot of the same thing, and again, it's like that's kind of what that's what people do. You got 6,500 people playing Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege right now, so it's like those games are always going to be there. There's even like 5,000 people watching. This is on Twitch, watching DayZ right now as well. So like, DayZ stuff like that. Again, the shooter kind of like open world type thing, it's still fairly successful in the sense that it has a committed audience, but it hasn't really been growing, with the exception of especially Valorant. Valorant is off the chain right now, but it's one of the few games that is. Apex is down. They're sitting at like Dragonflight numbers right now.
Really?
So it's not that great. Like, it's still good, considering that Zelda has like 50,000 right now. So like, again, it's like there's some good levels there, but then there's other things where it's like, well, it's clearly on the way out as a genre, not being like the top genre. And thank goodness, because I think looter shooters, I think we can all mostly agree that the time has kind of come and gone for them, and let's hope it stays that way, or somebody needs to come up with some new way of infusing it with energy that it didn't have before. So that is also most likely, we're going to likely see that coming out with, I would say, probably if there's a multiplayer component to it, probably Perfect Dark.
Oh, please God, no.
Well,
just learn
I think
your lesson, Microsoft. Jeez, sorry. Go ahead.
I know some people kind of roll their eyes at that. I'm thinking that if they do something new and different, not a looter shooter / loot box machine, like
Oh,
hopefully they get rid of that loot box thing, but it's the looter shooter, lobby game that might have, because that is what I would imagine that they might do for optional multiplayer content, because the game, as far as I understand, is going to be like, it's going to have a lot of different stuff to it, including a single player campaign, including a bunch of other things.
I hope
and
so.
That's going to be the focus. The
Yeah.
multiplayer is just going to be like a side aspect of it. That's what I've heard. That's the rumors, not confirmed. Hopefully we'll get a confirmation in a week from now. Hopefully we'll be talking about the new things that they're doing. Hopefully they don't just try and rehash and not include anything new like they did with Halo, and then mess up the single player campaign, and then mess up a bunch of other stuff, and then ruin the whole thing, and then it's just like, wow, what a complete waste of one of the greatest IPs ever. So hopefully it's not that, but yeah. I would imagine that it'll come around again, just probably not with any of the existing IPs. Yeah. So
hopefully it's not Starfield. Yeah, but back to Redfall. Yeah, they tried.
But back to Redfall, it's like they tried to follow a perfect recipe to making $1 billion franchise from loot boxes, but they did so. They started development on this when you could say, like, hey guys, like this aspect of this industry is kind of like, it's on its way out. You should probably try and figure out how to reinvigorate, or to do things in a new way, or to like have some like competition for like the Masquerade series. You could have done something like, more akin to something like that.
Well, they did, didn't they? Like, didn't they do Blood Hunt or whatever it's called?
No, they did, but not this Bethesda / Microsoft.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
Like, instead of chasing something that looked like it was going to be good, they went with something super just super dry and generic AF.
Yeah.
And that's where I think they really, really screwed up, is that they didn't try to do something new. They did something that was the safe, like, on paper bet, but nobody in the studio wanted to work on this. Nobody was actually interested in making this work. And maybe if they hadn't had all of the crazy amount of layoffs that they had, they might have succeeded. And I was telling Moon this on the way back yesterday on our long trip, that I think the best thing that they could have done is somebody who was a little bit higher up in that company should have, like, as soon as Phil like dropped by to visit, he should have said, like, hey, he, she, whatever, I don't think this game is going to be worth it. I don't think it's going to work. We're chasing a trend that's currently dying. Put us on assisting other companies while we retool and come up with a new pitch for a continuation in one of our previous game entries.
Agreed.
And I think that probably would have saved them. And it not only would have saved them, is it would have given them they probably would have fixed just like some of the other games that have had less than successful releases recently. Maybe any of the work that they could have done over the last like 3 years would have been more beneficial to literally do anything else.
Yeah.
Like, have them assist Halo. Probably would have had a better outcome for that game if they had done that. Yeah. Have them assist Bethesda with the Starfield. Again, probably 1,000 times more worthwhile than doing what they did, which was clout chasing some kind of stupid vampire looter shooter concept that, I mean, is just looks like to gamers, nobody asked for this. Nobody wanted this. Nobody was looking for this. It wasn't a thing that people were interested in. Mm-hmm. And then when you try and pitch it on top of the fact that none of the staff were interested in this, it was just a recipe for disaster. And that's essentially what we got.
Redfall.
Lots of additional little things to include in that, but that's basically the summary.
Yeah.
Is like, nobody wanted this game. Nobody wanted to make this game. Nobody was interested in this game, and the passion translated into what was made, which was pile of dung, and that was the amount of passion that was put into it.
Yeah.
So yeah. And again, I don't blame the developers on this, especially now that we know that 70% of them quit. It's like they were obviously voting with their feet. I think that, and I don't think it was Phil's fault either. It was his fault in the sense that he didn't.
He's the leader.
He should have. You know, and leaders have this problem. Here's a leadership rule for you. When you take over a company or when you take over a position at a company, walk around and talk to literally everybody and ask them to be extremely candid with you, period.
Yeah, exactly.
Like one of the best things that I've ever seen a leader do is walked into a new company, said, "Hi, I am the new boss. I do not know any of your names yet. I'm very bad with faces. What I'm going to have you guys do is go back to work. Everybody just do whatever you're doing or mill around. I'm going to walk through and I'm going to talk to everybody and see where their things are. Give me your raw, unfiltered opinion. I promise you, I'm not going to remember who you are by tomorrow. So there's going to be no like, you know, you're fired because you told me that your boss was an idiot."
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's none of that. So
it's
just give me your raw,
of the general
unfiltered
idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And if he had done that at Arkane, he would have gotten the sense that, wow, nobody is happy about working on this game. Nobody's super passionate about this. And then taking a step back and going, this whole concept's kind of dumb.
Yeah.
Like when you really think about it, it's like, yeah, it's good on paper. And you can tell that a bunch of suits who don't, like, they own a video game company, but they don't actually know how to, like, they don't actually know what a successful game is. And that's, I would say, everybody at ZeniMax, the parent company studio, not the ZeniMax studio, because again, those are two different entities. But that idea that a bunch of suits go sit in a boardroom and they hear a pitch and they go, on paper, this pitch sounds amazing. It's like, you don't actually know what video games are. You don't actually know why people play them. And you have no idea what makes a good video game.
Yeah. It's a classic clashing of the business world with the creative world. And it couldn't have happened to a better company. Like Arkane is, I think, Prey, their version of Prey, not the one that came out in 2006, but the more recent one, is probably one of the top 10 most underrated games ever made. It's fantastic. Yep. Dishonored 1 and 2 obviously are fantastic takes on the stealth genre. And Deathloop, even though I haven't played it, there are clearly lots of people that enjoyed it. It got all those 10 out of 10 scores last year. Ash really liked it. And then just with this one game, not really necessarily due to any fault on behalf of Arkane, the entire team that was assembled there got blown apart by corporate directives. So it's a classic tale.
You know what I think would have been their absolute best use of time? Because
Elder Scrolls 6 support.
They should have made a bunch of mods and DLCs for a bunch of existing games that had the creatures from Prey.
Oh yes.
And just threw them into literally everything that they could. Like, imagine having that as a DLC or like a free bonus content in like Minecraft, right? Like Minecraft, you have the ability to turn on your server the Prey mod, in which there's a monster who will duplicate a random item in and around your camp.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't figure out which thing it is within a certain amount of time, it will attack you. It's like,
it's such a genius concept.
Probably would have made them more money as a free giveaway in just selling the older version of Prey than if they would have than launching this game the way it was. Yeah. It's so bad. It's so poor. Like, again, it's like, why did anybody think this was good? And it's like, well, the only people who thought it was good was the board members who voted on it.
Yeah. Make it up or screw you.
And then the leadership that very poorly handled their community and the developers in rallying this we're going to make this game. And again, I'm going to call out the team leads and the leadership at Arkane. They were more interested in impressing their new bosses with getting this game actually made than they were in the fear of going to those same bosses saying, this just isn't working. We really need to work on something that we're actually passionate about.
Yeah. And that's not a theory. That's exactly what happened, guys. Go read the
Yeah.
articles. And it's a shame. Let's just hope that this isn't indicative of what's going to happen with all the other IPs over at Microsoft, especially after the Activision Blizzard merger has happened. Let's just hope that this is just a one and done type of thing, and things will be better in the future. Although, given what we've been hearing behind the scenes in regards to stuff like Perfect Dark, I don't really have necessarily much reason to be optimistic. But hey, at least Starfield is coming in a few months. All right. Let's move on to this next story. Sybe, it's your favorite company, and talk about the one thing that just pisses us off continuously about them. So, Nintendo, they're not a big fan of emulators, in case you guys didn't know.
Don't say!
You don't say! Yes, insert the Nicolas Cage meme. So, anybody who's a Nintendo fan and doesn't have any of their hardware or software that works, 20 years after the release, like the GameCube or the Wii, they have to rely on emulators if they have a PC. And the emulator that most people rely on is one that's called Dolphin. I use Dolphin. If it weren't for Dolphin, I wouldn't have been able to experience a game like Eternal Darkness, which, on the subject of most underrated games ever, I think that might be the most underrated, at least 2 or 3, maybe behind Talos Principle or something like that. I wouldn't have been able to play it otherwise. If, well, I mean, I do have my wife and she owns a copy, so I did play it legally. But yeah, like it's hard is what I'm trying to say, and Nintendo doesn't make it any easier. If you want to play these games legally, most of the time you have to spend hundreds of dollars, way beyond what these things should actually be priced at. Well,
and in a lot of cases, like I remember reading that guy who wanted his son to experience the same gaming evolution that he did, so he got him started on the games that he started out as a kid,
nice. And
then slowly progressed him through. Yeah, Ash talked about this a long while ago, but it was like following his thing. He's like he went hunting at these game studios, at these game stores and online, trying to find the physical copies, because he actually had him play on the original equipment, and it costed him thousands and thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to point this out again, Nintendo, you're not making any money on those sales.
Yeah,
because it's a sale to sale of the old physical goods. Now I know that you don't want to, they want to switch to the digital marketplace now, but again, it's just like, if you just had an option for people to just emulate on the PC, any of your old games, it doesn't have to be your new ones, just your older games, like $1 billion, probably $1 trillion over the course of, several decades, just sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah.
Drives me nuts.
Yeah, and not necessarily emulate. Just give us the option to purchase it legally. We do it, but you don't. But anyways, back to Dolphin. Steam, the game distribution service that most PC gamers use, recently they've been enabling things so that, if you use an emulator for any old console like the PS2 or the PS3 or the Xbox 360 or like any of the really old consoles, you can wire them through Steam, so that way you don't have to boot them up outside of Steam like we normally do. You can just go to the bar where all your games are on the left side of your Steam window and just access it there, which is convenient. I noticed actually just a couple days ago that DuckStation, which is the emulator that I used to emulate PlayStation 1 games, was there. And apparently they had a deal where pretty soon they were going to allow the Dolphin emulator to work on Steam as well. However, Nintendo recently issued a cease and desist order. And Valve, the people that own Steam, actually aided in taking the stuff down, we later figured out. Now, Sybe, this is a bit of a tricky situation. As we were just laying out, we're very, very critical of Nintendo's behavior when it comes to the whole process of emulation and the way they make their games available. However, with this, it's a bit of a trickier situation because it does seem like Nintendo has somewhat of a legal leg to stand on. Now, it's not the firmest leg, but there does seem to be something there. So I'm going to try to explain this as best as I can. And Sybe, if I get anything wrong here, just feel free to interrupt me here, okay? So apparently, Nintendo explained to Valve when they prevented the Dolphin emulator from being made available on Steam. They said that it was deemed illegal due to what are known as cryptographic keys. Now, what are those, and why were they unauthorized cryptographic keys? Well, it's kind of hard to explain. So, when you download an emulator, like the aforementioned DuckStation, what you normally have to do is download what is known as a BIOS file. Now, BIOS is an acronym for Basic Input and Output System. What a BIOS allows you to do is when you put a disk into, let's say you have an old PlayStation 1 console, the BIOS that's installed on that PlayStation 1 console is what enables a particular disk that's inserted into that PlayStation console to be playable. So it's like input, output. You put the disc in, output the game, on that sort of thing. It's not exactly like that, but that's the basic idea. So when you download an emulator like DuckStation on your PC, not only do you have to download the emulator, you also have to download the BIOS file. Now, some emulators, like DuckStation, don't have an issue distributing BIOS because there's certain U.S. fair use law that enables people to copy BIOS files and distribute them around, or you can provide them yourself. Dolphin, on the other hand, does not. And it's kind of complicated. Let me just look at my notes here for a second. So Dolphin, there's a BIOS key. So the consoles, I forgot to mention this. The consoles that Dolphin emulates are the GameCube and the Wii. Those came out like early 2000s, mid 2000s. And in order for the Dolphin emulator to run Wii games, it has to have a very specific BIOS file called a Wii common key. Now, there's a problem with this because this Wii common key is not something that has been authorized by Nintendo to be distributed as sort of a BIOS file that enables the emulator to play the games. Did that make relative sense, Sybe?
It's essentially the same thing, but it's a way of like coding description that throws it from the guaranteed like free the concept of the free use system in good faith, just assuming good faith, to this gray area of like technical loophole in which it doesn't get the same protections. Right. And that's what ended up throwing this into a bit of a tizzy.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So exactly. So to summarize here a little bit as we come to the end of the story summary here. I read about this from an article on Ars Technica, and the guys over there interviewed a digital media specialist attorney named John Loiterman to ask him if Nintendo has a legal leg to stand here. And he was of two minds. I'm going to quote him directly. I think Nintendo has a legitimate, if untested, argument that the encryption keys violate the anti-circumvention provision of DMCA. If they're including the Wii common key in the files, then maybe there's an argument that it goes further on an anti-circumvention front. And if you're lost already, don't worry, I'm going to summarize in a second. Loiterman continued, though, that Nintendo's argument here isn't clear-cut. And he goes on with this following quote. The use of the encryption key in Dolphin isn't a circumvention mechanism and is more like the BIOS to the extent that it is necessary to access unprotected functional elements. So in other words, to make this a lot more simpler for you guys to understand, if the Dolphin emulator itself is legal, which it is, it's a virtual paperweight if you can't use the Wii common key to access Wii games. So it's like Nintendo can't really say that, oh, yeah, sure, it's legal to use the Dolphin emulator, but you can't use the Wii common key to make the Wii games work on it. Otherwise, there's no point to the emulator. It just cancels itself out. So Loiterman said that Dolphin, if this goes to trial, Dolphin could win if they simply say, okay, you just need to insert the common key yourself. So what I do, Sybe, for emulating my PlayStation games, I had to download the BIOS file separately. Whereas with Dolphin, it seems like the Wii BIOS common key it already comes packaged with it. So best case scenario, Dolphin, well, not best case scenario, but one of the scenarios in which Dolphin comes out unscathed is that they would just have to take the key out from the current Dolphin build and have people download it separately, which is a pain in the ass, but hey, at least we would still have this wonderful method to emulate these old games. So it's hard to say whether or not it will ultimately end up on Steam. If I were to sort of pick a side here, I think I would side with the people over at Dolphin, even though this was sort of clumsy on their part, including the Wii Common Key BIOS as a part of the emulator instead of having people download it themselves. But ultimately, this wouldn't really be that big of an issue in the first place if Nintendo were more seriously about the way that they allowed emulation of their games. And besides, even if it doesn't end up on Steam, you can just do what most people who emulate have already done and just start it up as a separate file. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys understood some of that. If you didn't, leave us a comment down below and we'll try to address it. Side, I'm curious to hear if you have any additional thoughts on this.
I mean, it's just the same one that I always have, unfortunately, and that is that if Nintendo and these older companies would just understand the value and the customer service that is available to them to just offer these things in a fair deal, and to do so with a level of kindness and compassion would just go so far in cementing them as a good company. And again, it's so easy to do this. It's so cheap to do this, just to do the most basic form of this, that you wonder who and why, what the possible reasoning is for looking at people and saying, no, shut up, or we're going to crush you.
Pride.
Stop asking me for this. I don't want to do it anymore. It's so bizarre. It's like, it is literally the difference of going to McDonald's and asking them to make you fries without salt. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's the equivalent difference is, oh, okay, well, we'll just go get the basic fries that doesn't have any of this stuff. How about we charge you the same price that we're charging you for the stuff with the salt? And the answer is yeah. And it's like, okay, great. Here you go. That actually saves me money. And I made the same sale as I did today. Very few people would be complaining if they packaged up old games and sold them at a standard current day game price. There would be a lot of people going, why am I paying $59.99 or $69.99 for this game that's 25 years old? And the response would be, you don't have to, nobody's forcing you to buy it. It's like, it's the same price as it always was. But in some cases, it boils down to the fact, and I think this is actually the real answer. Like, I know I'm snooty and snippy with a lot of these answers. I think the actual answer is that in many cases, they would have to remake a new deal with a new licensing deal with some of these old people. Right now, they have enough licensing control to sit on it to make it so that the original creators don't have a voice and the customers don't have a voice. And they know that if they were to actually make it available for current day sale, that they would actually have to reimburse older content creators. And some of those older creators, not content creators as in YouTubers, content creators as in like game developers.
Yeah.
That those old developers or their estates, because some of them have actually passed away now, would say, well, hey, you're profiting off of this. There's a deal in the contract that says that we get a portion of these sales. And they just don't want to deal with that and run the risk of having to actually sit down at a negotiating table with these people, because that might mean that they might actually have to pay more money to current day developers. And that's, I'm sure in some cases, that's a horrifying prospect to greedy people who really like money.
Yeah. Even though making all this stuff work out would probably make them even more money than they're making right now. They just don't want to deal with the hassle.
You absolutely nailed it. The worst case scenario is that you don't sell it for a cheap thing. you sell it for basically what you're selling current day video games for. And like that's not a loss in any way, shape, or form. Like it just isn't. Like selling the original Mario for $69.99. Like really? That's a scary prospect to you. You know, you slap it with a small tiny emulator and you throw it up on the Steam page and it gets like 2 million sales overnight because people want to have a permanent copy of this in their library. That's what's scary to you, is that you might make 2 million sales at a current day price that ends up selling just as much or more than one of your other most recently released games. I'm sure that's a terrifying prospect to you.
God forbid.
Oh God, it's so confusing. Like I said, I think it boils down to licensing agreements with the original developers, and they're either waiting for those licensing agreements to expire so that they don't have to pay these people, which is so dirty and filthy that it's disgusting to even think about it. But again, I'm not going to say that is what it is. Yeah. I'm just saying that it's most likely what it is, and that it's dirty and disgusting. And it really makes me upset that humanity has gotten to this level. But it's like, all right, or it's some other licensing issue deal, maybe with who knows what. I can't even think. Like again, it confuses me so much. It's like the things that I assume are true are really nasty when you think about it. Yeah. And it's like, I hope this isn't true, because that would make it so that would mean that these people are scumbags. And it's like, you don't want to believe that anybody is a scumbag, because the world is a better place without scumbags. But the unfortunate thing is that there are a lot of scumbags.
Yeah, it's better when you assume ignorance instead of malice. Mm-hmm. But when it is malice, it's quite depressing. But you know what's not depressing, Syb? Bethesda mods. I think it's a mod, right? So what's going on with this? Yeah, it's not. It's called. So
this isn't a mod. Although there is another rumor that came out just in the last day. There's a rumor that Fallout London, that Bethesda has actually bought out the entire development team, and they are actually going to be announcing Fallout London as an actual full-on DLC or expansion to I believe it's made in Fallout 4. I'm almost positive on that. I'm not 100%.
Wait. Hold on. So what? They must, if that's true, that must mean that there's something really, really special going on with Fallout London compared to other fan-made mods I'm looking forward to, Skyblivion and Skywind.
Yeah, so I think I sent out the I think this was a couple months ago when I sent out the trailer for Fallout London, and the trailer was fantastic. Yeah. I cannot tell you how fantastic it was. You looked at it and you were like, how is this not an official expansion? It gets people excited for it, and it's really, really cool. The rumor, there's a lot of people saying that the rumor is completely bunk, and it's possible. We do know that Bethesda has been on a recent string of recruiting modders, and they do a lot of hiring of modders. So it's possible. I don't know if it's true, but it's possible that Fallout London may actually end up coming out as a DLC. Or as a free paid mod or something like that. So we'll see where that comes out at. There's some rumors on that. We might see something on that. But this Winter of Atom is actually the tabletop game, the official tabletop game of Fallout 4, run through the company that produces this kind of a smaller company when it comes to tabletop game production, and Obsidian. Oh, sorry, not Obsidian. Bethesda. So it's actually got the Bethesda people in there, and they actually did this. So they put out this. It's an update to the tabletop experience. It's got some story content. It's got some really cool stuff. It's extremely Lovecraftian. And it happens. I do believe that it happens. It's why they call it a prequel. It happens prior to all of the stuff that happened in Fallout 1. So it's it's technically before the events, the main game series start, minus of course 76, because nobody takes that as canon right now. But it's a very exciting prospect, and I'm really, really excited about what this means for the company going forward and for the lore going forward. This has gone off really, really well. The game is actually very, very interesting. The monsters are very very, very Lovecraftian. The locations, there's some crazy stuff. There's a whole bunch of the aspects, and you've researched this before, the Lovecraftian type stuff that's happening in the Fallout series that have been happening since 2, actually, I think.
Actually,
but especially in 3 and 4.
I didn't actually do that. I was going to ask, like, because my knowledge of Fallout only at the moment sort of resides within Fallout New Vegas. Are aliens a canonical element of Fallout?
Yes.
Oh,
so
okay.
Aliens themselves are a canonical thing, but so is Lovecraftian outer what you might call like old gods that have like buried there's histories buried in human history going back thousands upon thousands of years within the Fallout universe, including ancient Sumerian cities that were influenced by again, like basically a Cthulhu type god, a dark god that drives people to insanity, mass self-sacrifice and all this other stuff. It's been there. It's always been there, especially in 3 and in 4. Even in 76, there's hidden aspects of it all over the place, and it's absolutely amazing. If you love Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, if you like, fleshy body horror type stuff, madness inducing things, it's like this is the pinnacle of that, and it's so very good.
Nice. Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that for me. I always knew like there were Easter eggs for aliens, and you could get like laser guns. I think you could do that in Fallout 3 if I recall correctly, but I just couldn't remember if they were canonical or not.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So one of the running theories on who actually started the nukes on the day in 2077 when everybody got nuked, some of the theory is that it was in fact aliens that fired the first nukes that resulted in everybody else firing all of them.
Right. Oh.
Yeah, but no, the aliens are actually like they had been watching for a really long time. They had been monitoring, and something happened that stranded one of their motherships in orbit for a few hundred years. And that the aliens had been going back and forth, trying to repair it, trying to access something, and that there's been this continuing alien invasion and influence within the universe, because Fallout really is a collection of the old like 1930s style sci-fi, and aliens were huge in 1930s sci-fi, absolutely massive. And so there's all this kind of cool stuff. I'm excited to talk about Fallout stuff all the time because it's one of my big things. Also in the news recently, Tim Kaine came out and did a bunch of his talks about like Fallout and the project and how it happened, and how Fallout 1 was a side project until it was basically like ready to go, and then they kind of beefed it up because it was actually looking really good, but they didn't think that it was actually going to like hit mainstream, and then it did, and then Fallout 2 was so good that it also prompted that, and that unfortunately poor leadership and bad luck ended up sinking the studio sank Interplay before they could get the third game out.
Okay, sorry guys, we had to stop the recording there for just a second. There was a lot of noise going on downstairs for some reason.
Yeah, we had the Men in Black come by both of our places at the exact same time and knock on the door because we were talking a little too much about the aliens. Yeah. So, yeah.
Who are you? All right, so let's get into these last few topics. They're pretty short. We can go through them pretty quickly. Metal Gear Solid 3, obviously there was a big celebration on the show last week. In case you guys don't know, I'm the biggest Metal Gear Solid fan on the planet, objectively speaking. And as you can imagine, I was quite excited when Metal Gear Solid 3, well, Konami announced that Metal Gear Solid 3 is getting a remake in the form of Metal Gear Solid Delta. There weren't a whole lot of news elements that came out of this right away. A lot of people were confused as to who exactly was working on this project, how it was going to be handled. Was it going to be a full-on remake, or a lot of the things, the game elements from back in 2004 when it originally released, going to be maintained? Well, we got some details this past week. It has been confirmed that the people working on this project are people that work internally at Konami. And Virtuos. So that part of the rumor was true. The people that worked on the ports for the Switch ports for Dark Souls and Bioshock and all that, they are helping Konami out with this project. People were wondering whether or not the dialogue from the old game was going to be re-recorded for the remake. Apparently not. Apparently all the original voice recordings from 2004 are going to be used in this remake, which is good and makes practical sense, just in case any of the voice actors that they wanted to get back probably would say no out of loyalty to Kojima or something. And then this is the most shocking piece of info, Sybe. Like, this kind of surprised me. I don't know if it surprised you when you heard it. Kojima isn't involved.
Oh, yeah, no, I did wake up in the morning and I had one of those, like, you know, you pick up the paper, I read it, of course, naturally this was front page news. I dropped my coffee, you know, and it spun to the ground very slowly and the glass shattered and there was this long drawn out French horn sound in the distance, and yeah, very shocking.
Yes, I couldn't believe it. You know, like, after what Konami, you know, totally screwed him over for life. Yeah, I'm surprised he's not involved. But it was confirmed that people that were a part of Kojima's team when he was still at Konami are going to be involved with the project. So that gives me some hope. I don't know, like, given everything that we just talked about in regards to, like, Microsoft and you know, corporate directive influencing the development of Redfall, I'm not really willing to forgive or be suddenly more optimistic about the project just because that's the case. Mm-hmm. And then finally, the whole Delta thing, you know, the triangle at the end of Metal Gear Solid instead of the number 3 was explained. I'm quoting directly from an article from IGN. The Delta symbol was chosen because its meaning fits the concept of the remake project, a Konami spokesperson said. Delta is a character from the Greek alphabet that means change or difference in mathematics and variables, and also has the meaning of changing an amount without changing the structure. So basically, it's symbolic of them adding on top of what was already there without changing the fundamentals of what made Metal Gear Solid 3 what it was, which is good. This is exactly what I thought they should have done from the beginning. It's the most diplomatic way forward. And yeah, even though it is Konami, everything else sort of indicates to me that they're trying to approach this in the smartest way possible. Now, whether or not that amounts to something, we'll have to see. But these new extra details are encouraging. Sybe, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we wish that people could bury hatchets and could apologize. I think that's the biggest thing.
And reboot Silent Hills. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and bring, you know, it wouldn't even be that hard. You know, like, he wouldn't need to, like, quit his other company or anything like that. You just bring him in as a consultant, right? You know, and yeah. He says his piece, but I think the blood is so bad there, and I do think that's mostly on not on Konami. Kojima's part. It's on Konami and the leadership at the company, because of just what we know from Japanese culture. I think that's just how it rolled out. But yeah, it's sad to see that happen. I want to see it be successful, and I hope it does have that success, because not because Konami deserves it, but because there are still people on the team that are working hard on this kind of stuff, and new studios, and the leadership needs to be proven slightly wrong in that way, so that they go, oh, okay, I guess we kind of did make a mistake in handling this before, and then hopefully they can learn and move forward, having learned a lesson. That would be nice. And then it not be garbage so that it doesn't hurt the fans any more than the fans have already been hurt. So, yeah, let's hope.
All
Fingers
right.
crossed.
And just a couple more stories. When is this thing coming out? Did it say in the trailer a RoboCop game?
I believe it's coming out next month.
What?
I could be wrong on that, but I believe that's what I remembered hearing and reading from the Twitter audience that alerted me to this. But yeah, I do believe this is coming out soon, like legitimately soon. I'll check here as we're kind of going through it. But yeah, it's overall like
it looks just to be like a game version of the original game, the original movie.
Yeah, it's very much it is very much a very faithful adaptation of RoboCop the movie into game form, at least as far as the combat goes. And I gotta say, so RoboCop for me was huge when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Being young autistic kid, seeing and being basically half a computer. This was just like it screamed, "Oh, hey, yeah, this is basically how I see the world." Like it's very similar in all those kinds of ways, and it looks just so good.
Mm-hmm.
And now there was a trailer that was out a while ago. The official 4K trailer came out 2 months ago, but it didn't really. It didn't feel like I didn't feel like jumping on it because it was first person, and the first person is still quite difficult for me. But also, how many times have official 4K trailers lied to us on the quality of the game? It's like you swing a cat and you'll hit like half a dozen companies that have done that in the last 6 months, right? So it really wasn't on my radar until we saw this, which was the hands-on gameplay. And as soon as they had that hands-on gameplay, and I looked at that, I was like, oh wow, okay, so this is actually good. Like it feels good, it looks good. It was 10 minutes of pure gameplay on a lot of these guys going up, and it looks great. It looks very visceral, and I'm really excited that we're going to see this done right. I hope the gameplay. Again, this was in gameplay recorded from the news guys from these sites. I believe it was IGN, and there was another one who had it, GameStop.
Mm-hmm.
So IGN and GameStop both had hands-on with it. Both had hands-on. According to what they said, that's their gameplay. So this is the guy playing the game, going through it. It's not the best. I would say this is AA, not AAA.
Yeah.
But considering that it is a smaller studio and they are working with a genre with an IP that has been a little out of sorts for a while, but it looks good. It looks really good, and I'm really excited and fingers crossed, because it looks like, if they do this right, I mean, this could be amazing. So
yeah, somebody I only ever saw the first RoboCop movie because from everything that I could gather, it's the one that you have to see, and then everything else is more so just if you especially loved the first movie, you can enjoy RoboCop 2 and 3 and then whatever else. But yeah, I only saw the first one once and I enjoyed it. It's a very, very good movie and quite a timely movie nowadays. And just by looking at this trailer, you could tell that it was developed by people that really do have a lot of passion for the IP and do want to make you feel as if you are RoboCop, instilling his brand of justice. I just hope that as far as, the original story of the original movie and how... what's the name of the character of RoboCop? Not Peter Sellers, the actor, but it was Peter Sellers, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, whatever his character's name. I hope that...
I grew up watching... I watched way more of the television show than I did the movies. Which people forget that there was like several seasons of a television show that were actually like really, 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 really good. And they nailed a whole bunch of stuff. science wise that have actually like kind of come true, which is really, it's always really cool when you see science fiction and then you fast forward 20 or 30 years from the air date and you go, oh, hey, look, they nailed this. Like, they really nailed this. There's a guy in the 1800s that basically like nailed cell phones, like just like absolutely nailed what cell phones would do. But anyways, it is coming out in September. So not next month, but September. So this fall, it is coming out supposedly.
Okay, well,
and if the game looks this good right now, my fingers are crossed. I hope that, like, hopefully, maybe I will try to power through this with the motion sickness. I regretted it the last time I tried to do that with a game, but this time might be worth it. So
if it ends up being good, I might buy it for $1. No, more than $1. All right, and then finally, just a very quick thing on E3. Jeff Keighley, the guy who is running Summer Game Fest, which is going to be on Thursday, and we're going to be streaming it on the main Triple S League channel, right?
Yeah. So we're going to be streaming it there. We're going to be partnering up with a couple of our friends,
Last No Meal,
Neon Arcade,
nice,
to go over some of this stuff. There is a huge schedule. We're going to be trying to stream as many of them as we can, but the big ones, obviously, we're going to be covering the big ones. Every big showcase, we are 100% going to be covering it. That of course includes the Starfield one, the big Microsoft one, and then there's a bunch of additional ones that we are looking at covering. So we're really, really excited to catch this stuff. We're looking forward to what hopefully will be good stuff.
Yeah, well, we're hoping it is. It's the thing that we sort of have to rely on, and sort of the stuff surrounding it as sort of our replacement for E3. And kudos to Jeff Keighley for being able to provide something like that for us. Because even though E3 is sort of a troublesome time of year when it was still around, because it's just game developers lying to us, but we like to enjoy the lie. We like to think that the lie is real for the games that are coming out. But, sometimes the stuff that they tell us is actually true, and it ends up being awesome. And Jeff Keighley sort of seemed to want to continue that tradition with Summer Game Fest. Although some people tended to think that because that's what he was doing, that he was in a way trying to provide competition to E3 and to sort of take him out of the picture so they could build up his own brand. Although in an interview with Video Games Chronicle on one of their podcasts, he actually shot down that idea. He said, no, I wasn't trying to do that. I loved E3. And he said basically that E3 killed itself, which is true because it just became too expensive for them to run it, and everybody else was pulling out of it, so there was really no incentive for them to continue to do it. I'll quote him directly here. He said, I think E3 sort of killed itself in a way. I understand why people say Summer Game Fest killed E3, but I think if anything, we created Summer Game Fest, and I built Summer Game Fest because I saw the wheels falling off the wagon of E3. As someone who loves that time of year for 2 decades, E3 was part of my life since I was a 15-year-old kid, from the first E3 in 1995. I went to every show, I loved it, and it defined my summer. It was so exciting to me, and it was heartbreaking to see that start to fall apart. I think they had a relevancy problem, and then they also had a participation problem over the final years. So yeah, I think the question is, if we didn't do Summer Game Fest, what would happen? I think things would have just kind of really splintered apart this summer. And he's right. But thankfully, he provided us that alternative, and we do have that. We do still have that section that happens at the beginning of every June, where Summer Games Fest happens, and then stuff around it happens as well. So like last week, we got PlayStation, and then a couple days after Summer Game Fest, we get the Xbox and Starfield showcase, and then Ubisoft. But who cares about that?
Yeah, we just as a real quick history. We partnered with Upper Echelon Games, which is, I mean, he's been huge on YouTube recently. We partnered with him, and we sent him to E3 to do live interviews with a professional reporter game access pass. We weren't. It's not like we tried to sneak in as attendee guests, like the game fans, and try to like weasel in to grab a few interviews. Unlike certain other journalists who did exactly that. No, we followed the rules that they set, and their bureaucracy at running E3 was so bad that it was a complete and total waste of time and money. And when you do that to people who are paying, almost $2,000 USD to show up and do that kind of stuff, and we're paying that to you, and you can't facilitate that at all, we, the users, are not the problem. You are the problem, and you are the only reason why you have failed, and that's directed obviously at E3. Yeah. They became, again, I say this word because it's the direct definition of it. They became political, not in the sense of politics, but in the sense of like cliquey group party. I'm the in group, you're the out group. We're not letting you in. And they just let that fester in their own ranks, which started to pull it apart. And then the bureaucracy suffocated the whole thing to the point of death. And if you're wondering why I don't look at some of the big mega corps like Microsoft buying up, Activision with as much scrutiny, is because I look at EA and all these companies and Ubisoft and all of the problems that they're having and how they're starting to get closer and closer to that edge of completely falling apart and losing everything. It's like, that's what's going to happen to all of these companies if they don't stay, if their primary goal is not the customer and the people who make their products. The minute that they lose that connection with either of those people is the minute that they fall apart the next day. So this is what happened to EA. This is a huge, everybody in the games industry from EA to Microsoft should be quaking in their boots going, oh, if we become useless, we will die literally overnight.
Yep.
That's what will happen. Because it won't take long for everybody to just move on, and without a bailout, there's no hope for us. And that's what I think this is a reminder that this is the case here. I share his sentiments. I never wanted it to die. I wanted it to be good. I was there in 1997, and I really and years afterwards too, and I really enjoyed it. I met some really great people there. I met one of the original devs for Fallout there. I asked him a ton of questions. It's where we got the Nuka-Cola recipe from. And we love that interactability with people. It's like the conventions, but conventions are easily replaced by other conventions and other services that do the same thing when you do it better than the company that is making you jump through hoops for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours just to get on the plane to go where you want to go. It's like, if you're doing that and you're causing problems, don't be surprised when you're replaced.
Yeah, that's the good side of capitalism, ladies and gentlemen. All right, that does it for this episode of Maximum News, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry to end on that dour note, but keep in mind, we do have Summer Games Fest. We're looking to see a whole bunch of good stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing more from Alan Wake 2. Hellblade 2 is apparently going to be making another appearance if the Summer Game Fest teaser trailer is anything to go by, amongst a whole bunch of other things. We're going to be covering it, like we said. Syb, do you want to tell people about the main channel really quick, just before we conclude here?
Yeah, check out us on the Triple S League. Also, actually, no, I won't mention that. Yeah. Check us out on the Triple S League. We got stuff, and we've got plans, and we've got things to talk about, so it's gonna be great.
Yes, and you guys can find me on my main channel, just at Max Derrat. I got stuff and juicy tidbits and awesome stuff. If anything huge gets announced, I'll obviously do separate videos over there. I'll put links to my stuff and the main Triple S League main channel in the description box below. All right, I gotta go. Take care. Bye bye. Stay yellow.
Bye.